Chris Osgood was a teammate of mine, and when he was leaving on his way out, I remember it was the end of a season party or whatever, and he said to Matthew Snyder and I, he said, "You guys, you don't understand what it's like elsewhere. It's not the same as here. The team, the focus on winning, not just the players and the management and the coaches, but everybody in the forum, every usher, every doorman. It was about the team and it was about winning, and you saw the attitude about it. So the leadership and the Molson family and Serge and our president Ronald Corey, they just knew how it was supposed to be. And meritocracy is the best word.
That was Stanley Cup champion Brent Gilchrist, and you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolak, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolak, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. I'm your host here, Jason Podolak. And today we're going to be speaking with Brent Gilchrist. Brent Gilchrist is local to the Vernon area where I'm from. He played his minor hockey here, and we'll talk about a little bit of his minor hockey story. He was a provincial champion himself. We followed in his footsteps 10 years later. And he also played for the Spokane Chiefs, which actually, now that I think about it, we didn't talk about the Spokane Chiefs really at all, and the fact that we both played there and that we both have our name, as I look on the wall, in this top 25 Chiefs in 25 years, which is kind of cool that we share that. But yeah, Brent was an accomplished junior player for sure. He was a very, very respected NHL player and played almost 800 games over his career. Went to the finals twice, won it once with Detroit. And was always a guy that gave back. I mean, we talk about a little bit the value of being a good person and the value of being a good teammate, and how that, helped not only Detroit win the cup with his ridiculous amount of resilience and commitment to the team and what he was willing to go through from a personal pain perspective to be a part of those games, but also what he was willing to do in the locker room. As far as being a good teammate and putting the team first, and how that extended his career, and also how he put the community first. And we talked briefly at the beginning just about his involvement with the BC Children's Hospital, and how he had a golf tournament here locally for years and years that he would raise money for the Children's Hospital. I believe he almost raised $1 million over the course of the tournament. And that's just Brent. I mean, Brent was just a guy who was willing to go to bat for people he cares about, for the team he cares about, and for a cause that he cares about. And it's kind of reflected even in the fact of, his willingness just to jump on the podcast. I was a little bit late this week. I've been doing tons of stuff and just didn't have somebody on the docket, and texted, Brent last night or 2 days ago and said, "Hey, can we do something for Thursday or Friday?" And he just jumps right in, like it's one of those guys that it's really hard not to respect him and not to like him, and to hear his stories here in the next 60 to 70 minutes. I think he's worth your time. He's very he's a pensive guy. He's an even keel guy, but he's a great perspective. He's a great businessman now in his own right, and has lots of stories to share from his time, not only with the Canadians, but with the Wings as well. So, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Stanley Cup champion Brent Gilchrist. The long-anticipated interview, Gilly. I've been talking about it for a while, but here you are on the Up My Hockey podcast, so welcome.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate the invite.
Hey, thanks for being here. I was just looking. I didn't even, you know how it goes, I guess, with hockey, about, age. I knew you were older than me, but I didn't really know how much older. Gilly and I, for those listening, Gilly was from not from the Vernon area, but you always came back, and then you had that golf tournament, and Brent was, he always had I think it was Vernon Hospital, right? Was that what you?
It was the BC Children's Hospital.
BC Children's Hospital. Yeah. That's right. So that was that was what Brent was always involved in, and then he got the local hockey players there, and that was where we kind of first started meeting. And you were an established guy at that point. I knew that much, and there was no hockey DB then, so you've always been a mentor in this area, and that's where we kind of got to know each other, I guess, a little bit. Just talk to us about maybe, like, we'll just start maybe right back at the beginning. I like Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Is that where you played your minor hockey?
No. So I was born in Moose Jaw, but my parents came out. We actually came out for holidays in Vernon, and I was like 3 years old. And my parents came out for 2 weeks. Now, 2 weeks in the summer, I think it was August. Went home. They put their house up for sale in Moose Jaw. Packed the U-Haul up and moved out. My dad ran a construction company out here in Vernon, and so I grew up. I went to school and played all my minor hockey in Vernon. And it was I mean, a lot of hockey players come from Moose Jaw, so I guess that was a good start. But nothing against Moose Jaw, but Vernon was a pretty damn good place to grow up, as you know.
Right. Well, so your dad was in construction, just like my dad. They must have kind of been in the same marketplace for a while.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think your dad built mostly houses and I mean, maybe apartments. I'm not too sure, but my dad was more agriculture and industrial buildings. So
Gotcha.
Probably not exactly in the same loop, but in the 70s and 80s, building a lot of stuff and around Vernon, not so much in Vernon, but around sort of the farmland, Lumbee and Armstrong, etc.
Total sidebar, but one of the assistant coaches on my U13 team, well, it's not my U13 team, but where my younger two play, he's just buying his house off his grandparents. And I guess they're looking at all the paperwork or whatever, and they said, guess who built it? And it was like built in 1976 by my dad on LNA Road. I guess they haven't touched it since. He was joking about it, right? Like, it's the exact same. Wow. It was built in 76, and it was 46.5 all in. 46.5.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
I think my parents' house, which was not far from LNA Road up in the BX, was $27,000 in 1971, I think, 71 or 72. So that's where I grew up, and they had that house up until about 15 years ago. So.
That is bonkers. I love it. So you're a Vernon minor hockey product then, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. I played all my hockey, and Jeff Finley and I were defense partners, I think, when we were 5 years old. So I had a really good group to play with in Vernon. We won a couple provincials, or one provincial, and won the Winter Carnival tournament, and we were really good. We had, I think, 4 kids drafted off that team. We had Bruce Majors, Jay Stark, and then and Finner and I were both drafted and played. The other two didn't really play a lot up, but they played some in the minors.
Yeah, that's fine. That's wild. Again, that's actually, so yeah, you guys did, what, do you remember what year that was? And it was a Pee Wee Provincial, right? Like, that was when you won the tournament and you won the Pee Wee Provincial Championship that year, right?
Yeah, 1980.
1980.
Yeah, we were a really good team, and there were some good teams around. Kamloops was always good. Joe Murphy was playing in the Vancouver area. Ken Priestley was playing for Seafair. We beat them in the finals. Trevor Hendry and Jeff Sharples, Flaherty, they were playing in Terrace. There were a bunch of good kids playing in the province at the time.
Right.
Eddie Christoffel was playing in Trail. A lot of high picks. I mean, Joe went first overall, obviously, but he had a late birthday, so he was a year behind us.
Right. So you were a defenseman back in Pee Wee?
No, that was earlier on. So when I was really young, Jeff and I played defense. I think I moved up to play center when I was like 9 or something like that. So I just played center.
Yeah, because you guys won it in 80, and then I think in 90 we won it. Like, and the crazy part about that was too, and I mean, for everyone knowing, and it's no secret, like to have 3 guys on a Pee Wee team to play NHL hockey games is ridiculous from one town, right? And that was Higgy, like Matt Higgins, Brad Larson, and myself were on that team, and Mike Ford went on to be a Michigan State, D1 player. He was also on that team. We had a lot of guys go on to play junior. So for whatever the reason was, there was just, a lot of good players in that age group, and we were able to win it as well. And I mean, you won a cup, and it's so funny because like to rank a Pee Wee Provincial Championship anywhere in the mix, it seems silly, but like for me, that's still probably one of the top, I don't know, 5 things in my hockey career that I did. Like, it's super memorable.
Yeah.
It's a great experience.
I mean, history maybe not, it doesn't repeat, but it sure rhymes. And that's like 10 years later, the same sort of example in Vernon where, I don't know how big Vernon was in 1980, but it couldn't have been much more than 20,000. And we had 4 kids drafted. And like same with your 90 team, we had 3 kids, well, 2 kids that played a lot of games and 1 other that, had a cup of coffee in Quebec. And we just had a great athlete group. I mean, we won provincials in lacrosse, we won provincials in hockey. And so there's no doubt it has an effect on, it had a great effect, I'm sure, on you as a player and myself. And it's interesting that you talk about the Pee Wee Championship because I got to tell you, it's one of my highlights. I won a cup, but there was something about it. Nobody else cares like we do. Like everybody cares about the cup. So they don't really talk to me about the Pee Wee Championship unless they're from Vernon. But I'll tell you, we had such a spectacular team. And I remember, and when we ran into each other last Saturday night, like speaking to the Winter Carnival tournament on Saturday at the banquet, the Vernon Winter Carnival tournament, I told the kids the same thing. Like you're at a special time in your lives, and you'll remember these kids, these boys and girls now on your team, and if you do something special, you'll really, really remember them. So, and I do. Like lots of guys in town still in Vernon, and there's a brotherhood there for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's like a microcosm, right, of like the bigger picture. I'm sure your cup days there with Detroit, and I'm sure even like the cup final with Montreal, like that. Just, those are bonds that kind of don't go away. And I know that Pee Wee group that we had, like, there's a vast majority up at 47 years old, they're still friends, right, and still stay in contact. It's really kind of it's crazy, but it's super cool at the same time. What was that? So. And back when we were playing, there was only one place to play, which was kind of cool because you knew like all the best players were in the one spot. I mean, you all played AAA, right? As
yep,
it was called.
That's right.
And now, there's all these different leagues, and I know you've been probably removed for a bit now, but like, yeah, there's so many different places to play, and like who's where and who's this and who's that. But back when we were playing, we just kind of knew where everyone was, so it was easy. It was easy to kind of know where you were on the totem pole. Like, were you at that Pee Wee age? Granted, I mean, you guys went on to be drafted and NHLers. Was the writing on the wall at that point for you? Were you an early developer?
Well, we were good, and we had a lot of good players. And I think our Pee Wee team with Finner and I, and then Bruce Majors was probably when we were just younger than Pee Wee, he was probably more dominant than the rest of us, and was a really good player. I think in Pee Wee, we started to even out sort of the top players. I played on the second line, though Bruce played on the first line. I think we probably had the same amount or close to the same amount of goals. And then I think for me, I saw a difference in bantam with my teammates a little bit, and not to be arrogant, but the fact is I could feel that as the physical play came along and as the speed picked up, I felt like I was getting better and better, and maybe I felt like I was because I didn't have that feeling before in Pee Wee. I thought a lot of the players around me, I wanted to be the best, but I didn't necessarily was the best. And I think by the time I was 14, I felt like Finner and I kind of separated ourselves from the other guys to a certain extent. And then I was pretty quick because I played in the Western Hockey League sort of faster than the other ones did. Finner was 1 year behind me, but whatever. It just happened a little bit faster for me when I was sort of 14 to 16. And then, I really believed I could play.
Yeah. What was that? Do you think? Like, I mean, that's one of the things that I'm talking, like when I'm working with younger athletes now, is like the transition from Pee Wee to Bantam, which is now where the hitting starts. I mean, I think back when you were playing, like I think it was Pee Wee, there was still contact there, but not everybody had matured enough yet. And that's an interesting discussion in and of itself. Like I've had that discussion before. Like, it seems really wild to me to go from zero contact in Hockey Canada in U13, right? You're not allowed to do anything, to all of a sudden full-fledged, body contact at U15 when, for example, like my Hudson, my oldest, he's not super small, but he's not big either. But I'd say he's probably on the lower end of the physical scale right now. He's like 5'6.5", 120, right? There's kids that are smaller than him in the league. There's a kid in his team who's 6'2", 200. And to have that be the first year that you're hitting kind of seems a little bit wild to me. But what do you think about that?
Well, we were in a transition period because this sounds crazy. I might not be completely accurate, but they were going back and forth at the time. And I think when I was 11, we were hitting in Pee Wee. And I want to say that when we turned 12, they took it out. I'm not positive, but I know there was a transition there. So it was it was really strange times because we were hitting at 9 and 10.
Right.
And then I think at 12, we weren't allowed to hit. I mean, it kind of suited our team because we were super skilled, right? So, and, some kids were starting to get bigger at that 12-year-old age. But I think there's a big jump. I think that, I think physicality for me, I never shied away from it. Even though I'm not a big guy. I wasn't a big guy then. I wasn't super small, but I never had a problem with the physicality and the speed. And so I think that sort of bantam level, it started to, and I don't think anybody talked about whether I was big or not at the time. I was pretty physical and pretty strong. And then when I went to the Western Hockey League at 16, it was like, okay, everybody's talking about how small I was because I hadn't really grown yet. But I could avoid most of it. I was pretty fast and could avoid most of it, and really kind of I grew enough, but I wasn't growing fast, and I think it was 155 pounds my first year in the Western League.
Do you remember how tall you were?
Yeah, I think I was like 5'9". I ended up being 5'10" and a half, and I played most of my career in the NHL just under 180. I wish I was 180 now, but anyway.
So 185, 10. So yeah, I mean, and that was, well, I mean, you're kind of a generation. I mean, being 9 years older, like that was a bit of it. Like,
There's lots of guys. Yeah, there was lots of guys my size. I mean, Steve Yzerman and I was almost the exact same size. He might have been 2-3 pounds heavier than me.
Right.
There's lots of guys our size, my size, and yeah, and I also think like, we growing up just a little bit smaller. Again, I wasn't super undersized, but when you go into the Western Hockey League and you're somewhat undersized, you learn how to play. You learn how to protect yourself. You learn how to play in the traffic. If you don't learn how to play in the traffic, and you don't learn how to protect yourself, you're not really coming out of it. So, right. Good training, I think.
Yeah, well, training with what though?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is some guys who were really big, I noticed when we were growing up, they were really big and a lot stronger than all of us. They had in some ways, they had a bigger challenge when everybody got big and fast because they didn't have that advantage, and a lot of them had their heads down. I talk about one great player, sometimes Eric Lindros. He's such a great player, but I don't think he ever feared, physicality the way we had to, or the way I had to, for sure. And there was times when, Eric probably had his head down, and he was just so big and powerful but you get to the National League level, and a lot of guys can hit, even if they're a little bit smaller than you, and it's super physical. So, as a small guy, you always learn how to navigate and not get your head taken off.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that's, if you can hack it, and that's these kids, right, that are smaller right now and are having problems with the transition to bantam or whatever, but do have some skill and are quick, and like obviously they're going to grow at some stage too, right? I think it is an advantage. I mean, because you're required to think, you're required to have your head up, you're required to find space, right? And to your point about the bigger guys, and which is a hard thing for these scouts to do, right? These WHL scouts it's easy to fall in love with these guys at 14 years old that are 6 foot and flying around and looking like monsters out there. But at some point, everyone's going to be the same size as them, and does that skill now, develop along with them. So yeah, it's interesting. I think you probably had the right package there. Hey, like as far as your growth, and it allowed you to be a better player and find your way.
Yeah. Well, and I think, how many times have we heard, oh, he's too small. And I'm like, there's nobody that's too small. It's just, are you good enough or not? Everybody has their own disadvantages, whether it's a speed thing or a strength thing, or you're not the best puck handler, whatever it is. Everybody has something that they're not perfect at, unless you're maybe Connor. But so there's nobody that's too small. They're either good enough or they're not, and their size is a part of who they are. and that's it. Like they can either help a team win, and they're 5'8", or they can't, and that's nobody really cares. Now there's a real bias when you're young, or when you're people are like, he's not going to go high because he's too small. Well, I hope some of that bias is going away. But the fact is you can either help us win hockey games or you can't. And there's a lot of undersized guys that they make a lot of shit happen in the National Hockey League today. So you're either good enough or you're not. That's it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And finding a way to be valuable, at those sizes. One of the stories I like and I share with some of my clients is Nathan Gerby, who is like on the farthest end of the spectrum you could be. I mean, he's 5'4", I think 5'3". I mean, he's not playing anymore, but he did for a while. And and just reading his like Players Tribune article about like what his life was like growing up, with everyone obviously in the world telling him that he's too small. And it just created a mindset about him that was, the exact opposite. I mean, he knew he had to be super strong because he wasn't going to be tall, right? So like, his work ethic in the gym and all these things that he would do, like to your point, like to make up for this lack of height, right? And to play in the National League as long as he did at 5'4" is pretty remarkable.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he was good enough. I mean, he brought something to the team, and I mean, can you imagine? Like that'd be pretty inspiring too. See a guy out there doing what he was doing at his height. I think that makes everyone else be a little bit bigger too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The WHO is a big jump there, and you had 73 points in 51 games, if I see that right, with Kelowna. And then we're a fourth rounder, which is obviously nothing wrong with the fourth rounder. Actually, it would be more like a third rounder today because you're 79th overall. What was that season like for you? It seems like those are numbers that maybe you should have been a little bit higher as far as, in today's day and age, it looks like you would be.
Well, it's a good story. I mean, I was rated 16th overall at Christmas, and I wasn't hurt. And I was, obviously leading our team in scoring. I was scoring. And I got hurt, I think, in January or February. I hurt my knee. And so I missed a lot of the last part of the season, and that's the 51 games or whatever. I missed 20 games or whatever. So it looked like I had a very good chance to score 50 goals that year. And I had a good playoff, but we got knocked out in the first round by New West. And then before the draft, I dropped to 31. And, my agent took me to the draft. It looked like I was going to go for sure in the second round. And people were wondering, maybe sneak late in the first round. 21 teams at the time, as you know. And I slipped all the way to the fourth. And, my line mate got picked ahead of me, who, never played a game or anything, but he was a great guy. But it was just one of those things. It was pretty horrifying at the draft, the way, 78 picks. And Montreal picked me, but they were fantastic. The minute they picked me, my line mate got picked to Montreal the round before that. And I think I was fourth overall, but I was the sixth pick for the Canadiens. They had 2 first-round picks that year. And we had some good players in that draft. Tom Chorsky was picked in the first round. He's a high school kid out of Minnesota. And I think, the number one pick was Jose Charbonneau, who, again, just more had a cup of coffee with Montreal. But anyway, it is what it is. And maybe it motivated me more. I had a really good camp. I went into Montreal, had a great camp. And they were going to sign me immediately. So I went to main camp, and in those days, Montreal had a huge rookie camp. So, I guess, did it affect me at all? Maybe it motivated me more. So I was disappointed to go in the fourth round, but it doesn't really matter now. And I tell people, I told people that after all the time.
All right.
It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter now, even if you get drafted. Like lots of guys I played with never got drafted and became really good NHL players. So that's a measuring stick, and it certainly hits your ego a little bit. But I guess I probably took it the right way and just motivated me more.
How was it though in the moment? Because that's a long time to wait.
It was bad. And I was with another guy. I'm just trying to remember his name. He was rated right around the same time I was, so we were sitting together, really close. and our families were close, and the stress from the families and from us, it was really tough. I mean, once it happened, I forgot all about it. I went down to the table, and Serge Savard, who was one of my favorite people that I ever met in the game and played for. He was a fantastic guy. So they made me feel at home right away. They invited my parents over to their suite right after the draft to, go have a couple drinks and a bite to eat, and Serge's suite. And so, quickly forgotten, but it was a tough day. It was a day that I guess I'm happy I was there because I got to meet Serge right away and the brass, but that was a long day.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I don't know if you know my story. I've told it on here before. I'll just tell it quickly, but I was told by the Toronto Maple Leafs I was going to be their first round pick the next day. Right. It was the last meeting I had at the draft. Cliff Fletcher, just me and him. He shook my hand, said it, looked me in the eye and said, we're going to trade up and draft for you. And anyways, that never happened on draft day. Won't get into that. But then I waited to 31. So now that's not even close to the same. But I thought Toronto was going to go up and say my name. And then I was sitting there for 16 picks and it was crazy. And now it sounds so stupid, right? Because I was 31st overall and that's super, nice rewarding and everything else. But it's all about expectation. And when the expectation is something else, it's tough to keep your head on straight when you're going through that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, just going to take a short break from the discussion with Brent Gilchrist to give a shout out to a new reviewer. I love the testimonials. I love the reviews of the podcast, and I like to share them when I can, and especially ones from the United States. I don't know why. I just love that the American audience is growing. Me being a Canadian boy up here in Western Canada, just to see the geographic reach and promoting the podcast out to the neighbors to our south is fantastic. So want to share this one. It's a 5-star review, and it says amazing life perspectives in hockey is the heading, and eating is cool. Exclamation point, exclamation 89 via Apple's podcast. So eating is cool, says Jason is a gifted facilitator whose guests share their incredible journeys and lessons inside and outside of hockey. As a hockey parent, I really appreciate the honesty and authentic conversations that can help our family navigate youth hockey. As a fan of the game, I enjoyed hearing the inside. That's awesome. Really appreciate it. Eating is cool. Thanks for taking the time to do that. And if you are somebody out there right now who hasn't taken the time to write, there's 4 sentences there. That can seem daunting. It doesn't have to be 4 sentences. It can be 1 sentence. It really is a quick deal to do it. I really appreciate it if you're some out there who has listened to the podcast and appreciates the guests and their lessons and appreciates what I'm trying to do here with the podcast. By all means, please take the time on your Apple device to leave a review. As you've probably heard me say before, I believe it's about 60 to 70% of people listening is on an Apple device, is on an iPhone or an Apple computer. And so therefore you're listening to iTunes, and iTunes has the review network available to them, unlike other distributors of online audio content. So please, Apple listeners, get in there, and I'll give you a shout out during the next podcast here and leave acknowledging us here at Up My Hockey. So thanks again for everyone listening, and we'll get back to the podcast with Brent Gilchrist. Mike Needham, you're just talking about being six. You said there was 5. You were the 6th pick from Montreal.
Well, Montreal's history is, they always built it through the draft. Once the draft came, and they always had way more picks than anybody. They were always trading assets for picks, and they wanted to pick as many players as they could. And I looked at it a few years ago how many players they picked in '85. And they had there's 12 rounds in those days, and I bet you they had 14 or 15 picks, and 2 in the first round, and 1, 2. I think they had 3 in the third round, or 2 in the third round as well. So anyway, that was their model. They picked a lot of players. They picked a lot of French Canadian kids, hoping to have one of those guys come through, and but they had it right. They knew how to do it. They had, and when I went to the American League to play in Sherbrooke, it was all young guys. Pat Burns was our coach. We were all 20-year-olds. And so that's how they developed players, and they were better at it than anybody. And it was for me, it was just a great place to be drafted and come up in that system because it was all about winning. The tradition was definitely still there, and you felt it every day. And they treated you first class, and lots of pressure to win, lots of pressure to play well. But I didn't know any different. That's
Right.
how I came up.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, like Mike Needham, he was a Pittsburgh Penguin. I don't even remember the name. He's with
Yeah.
OHA
No,
now.
no, I played with Mike. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I
So
played with Mike in Dallas.
oh, okay, perfect. So he was just talking about his shared the story of him getting into pro hockey, and he had a killer last year of junior. I think he had 59 goals in 60 games or something. But he was I think he might have been a 4th-round pick too. And anyways, he went to main camp, had a good main camp, he said, but then got sent down and actually led the IHL team in scoring when he was there. And then the season started, and he was a healthy scratch for the first month, first 12 games, right? And anyways, we talked through that and like how hard that was for him. But he also like said, you realize that the game's not fair, because there was guys that were picked before him or guys that were probably the GM was saying this, we want these guys in the lineup and so on and so forth. And sometimes you just gotta, wait, bide your time and work your way in. So why I'm saying that is with the 6 picks before you, you say it doesn't matter, but I mean, some aspects it does matter, and you still need to work your ass off, and someone still needs to recognize that, right? Because there's probably guys that they, I'll use the word want to succeed maybe a little bit more than you.
So I think it's a really good point, and I will say that's why I think that the way Montreal ran their organization was just a step above most in those days. And the hierarchy was very tight. They did not treat superstars in a way that made other players feel like it was all about the team. And I would say from the moment I was there and I had a good training camp, I think that they were. I think they believed I could play the minute they saw me in that environment. And I think you're right. Like, I mean, Jose Charbonneau went up first. He was a 12th overall pick, and he was French Canadian, big guy, good skater. But boy, it changed fast. There's no doubt when you perform in that organization at that time, they wanted to win, and so I think I take your point. I think it's real. But man, in Montreal, they knew how to run teams. They were just like whoever's playing well is going to get on the ice. And you're right. I mean, we had superstar Stéphane Richer, and when Reach was struggling, like he wasn't on the bench. When I was struggling, I was on the bench, of course. But that's a lot different. He's a 50-goal scorer. But I never felt like they were favoring a higher pick that they had, high hopes for. It was an interesting place. Serge Savard was one of the best leaders I've ever seen.
Right.
Pat ended up being my coach. He got the job the next year, but we basically went up together. So, yeah, what an organization, what a place to play. Jacques Lemaire was there. He helped me a lot. He's sort of my size, and yeah, just the whole organization. I can't say enough about coming up there.
Do you think that's does that have to be a cog, like a big cog in the wheel of like, I know you're in business now and obviously you have all the experience in the NHL, but just a meritocracy based system, like is that crucial to have?
It's so good. I mean, I played in some great organizations, and Detroit was obviously fantastic. Chris Nyland was a teammate of mine, and when he was leaving on his way out, I remember it was the end of a season party or whatever, and he said to Matthew Snyder and he said, "You guys, you don't understand what it's like elsewhere. It's not the same as here. The team, the focus on winning, not just the players and the management and the coaches, but everybody in the forum, every usher, every doorman. It was about the team and it was about winning, and you saw the attitude about it. So the leadership and the Molson family and Serge and our president Ronald Corey, they just knew how it was supposed to be. And meritocracy is the best word. And I think, leadership from the top, like people talk about, owners, and, when you have a struggling ownership team or there's a controversial owner, it affects the team. I don't care what anybody says. And when we were in when I was in Dallas, we had Norm Green, who was a really good guy, but he didn't have the money to own an NHL team, in my opinion. Sorry, Norm, but and it affected our team because it was a stress that he really couldn't afford to be, in my opinion, in the game, and it affected our team. And we had a good team, and the next year we really struggled through a process of ownership change. And when the ownership changed to Thomas Hicks, um, we almost won the President's Trophy that year, and then we beat them. We beat Dallas in '98, and then they won in '99. Like the ownership and the hierarchy of the leadership is incredibly important in any organization, and owners matter, and then they hire the right people. But you're in support from the top, and in Montreal there was no place like it. I mean, it was incredible in those days.
So Pat Burns is I mean, I guess an icon, you could say, in the sport. He was a coach for a long time and won and had a fiery personality from the outside looking in. I never played for him. What was Pat like? Because you said you guys sort of came up together. Did you see him grow and mature as a coach through the time you were with him?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was a QPP, I think it's the Quebec Police Force, and his first year out of being a cop and being a full-time coach was Sherbrooke in 1987, and I played for him there. I led the team in scoring, and he was fantastic to me. And here's my break. I guess, like, I'm not saying I wouldn't have been a player, but I think it happened pretty fast because in those days, a lot of guys spent 2-3 years in the minors in Montreal. They were still in that mode. And after the season, he said, "You had a great season. I'm your biggest supporter, and I'm telling them in Montreal that you'll play next year." Well, 2 months later, he got the job. So, that's like, okay. And anyway, I did get sent down. They were pretty deep in center, as you know, Bobby Smith, Guy Carmino, Screwland, of course, and we were deep. I remember such a deep team. So I got sent down. I was leading the team scoring in 7 games. I think Screwland and Carmino both got hurt. And I got called up. Played against Mario my first game. And
how'd that go?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. They actually had a struggling start. The first 11 games, they were like 4-7 when I got called up. And I think we lost 8 or 9 games the rest of the season, and it was just a transition with a new coach and everything. But I never went back to the minors. That was October of '88, and I never played another game in the minors.
That's wild. I'll
go back to Pat because here's a guy who was a cop and coaching in Hull, coached a bunch of good players in Hull, Luke Robitaille, and so he comes up and he kind of was a cop. Like, he was tough and he was barking orders all the time. But as you got to know Pat, he was a softie, and his bark was way bigger than his bite. Right? He's super emotional. I mean, he's just a super emotional coach, but he went to bat for you. Period. Like, if somebody, he could get mad at you, and he might even say something in the media. Not much, not very rarely, but if somebody attacked a player, a media personality or somebody, he'd be like, nobody talks about my players like that. Their parents and maybe me, but nobody else. So he backed guys up, and they played for him. That's it. He's a good guy.
That's awesome. That's a pretty big, I don't know, like, the trust, I guess, is the word that comes up, right? Like, like when you see a guy doing that for you, or him saying that, and then you end up being on the team, and like, you build this trust. And I think the coaches that get the trust from the majority of the guys, like, you're giving a little more for that guy, are you not?
Well, I think that's the key word, Jason. You've been around long enough. Everything is trust. And the minute you lose the trust to your players, like, they don't think that you have their back. Like, you can rip a player apart, and you can be super tough on them, and you can be mad at the way they're playing or the way they're working, face to face. But if they don't think that you have their back with the media or with management, if they don't trust you, you're done. In my opinion, trust is everything. You can be as hard on a player, I think, as you want. Maybe not in today's game, in those days. And players will still play for you because they think they got, if you got my back, I'm going to play for you.
Yeah. and their best interest as a player too. I think that's another interesting aspect of coaching, right? Like you can lean on a guy as long as he believes that you're trying to get him better. Like because I think guys want to get better, and I think there's enough professionalism and understanding there that that's what they want to do too. But it's like, some guys push you, and I'm sure you probably felt it, and you didn't feel like it was coming from the right spot. Like it was almost like they were trying to make you worse, and then other times it would come at you and it's like, no, this guy believes in me. Like he sees more in me. I don't know. I've never been able to put my finger on why it felt different sometimes, but sometimes it just does.
I think you're right. I mean, I think one thing that I've well, I learned a bit of this after when I retired and I started coaching. I was coaching midget Triple A's, and what I learned from that experience, being on the other side, you learn so much. But I think here's the thing that I think the most of, and I didn't really see a lot of this till I played for Scotty Bowman, and Scotty operated in chaos, and it was pretty funny. As an older player, it didn't bother you because it was quite harmless. But the one thing with Scotty is you never saw him make a decision to protect his job. And obviously he was in a position that it didn't matter. He was Bowman and he had 10 cups and blah, blah, blah. So the thing is when a coach is under pressure and he starts making decisions that those decisions are about his job, not about the team or about a player. It's not about necessarily what's best for the team, but it's the decision that is the safest or looks the best. Or don't make the real hard decision on particularly, let's say, on a star player. Everybody knows it. The whole locker room knows that's a decision about his job and not about the team. Where Bowman, he had the luxury of making the decision that he thought was right. And I'm not saying he's always right, but he wasn't making an ass-covering decision ever. And you've been with coaches before that's like, well, when things aren't going well, they make ass-covering decisions. Right?
Yeah, sure.
So,
did you say operated chaos or operated in chaos? Is that how you described it earlier? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, he kept everybody off balance, really, and he wasn't traditional in terms of there was always something going on with a player or young guys. He was really, really more difficult on young guys because he wanted an old team, right? He wanted old, experienced players. So some of the things were quite harmless when you're 30, but he just like practice, for instance. Some practices you had to go in the gym after because there was absolutely no workout. And so Scotty watched hockey constantly. Like he'd go home after our games and watch all the games. They'd all be taped. And I'm certain that he would see something that happened in a game the night before, and then he'd come to practice and try to recreate something that was unique or interesting that he saw. And we didn't know what he was after. So he'd explain it, but so you got guys skating around with the puck kind of like warm, like they're looking for direction. And my first year in Detroit, I played with Steve Yzerman and Darren McCarty, and Stevie, our best player, the great Steve Yzerman, was a terrible practice player. Admittedly, he was a terrible practice player. So we were the green line, and we weren't getting called out for any complicated drills because Stevie would definitely screw the drill up. And so it'd be somebody else, it'd be Drape's line, the grind line, who were great workers and smart players, and they'd be able to go out and they'd screw it up, and Scotty would yell at them, but didn't want Stevie to mess the drill up the captain. So yeah, he was a super interesting guy to play for. At times it was frustrating, but at the end of the day, best bench coach I've ever seen, and just sometimes just made you relax and kind of laugh because it was funny, and his personality was huge, and there lots of stories about Scotty, and of course Ken Holland, another Vernon guy who was the manager, and he's got some great stories about, I guess, trying to manage Scotty. And what he would tell you is I wasn't managing him, he was managing me. And the reason Scotty and Kenny got along so well is Kenny knew who the boss was, and it wasn't him.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of one of those crazy scenarios, like with his success of the championships, right? I mean, it was just, I don't even know how to say it because I don't mean to disrespect Scotty Bowman, but you hear some stories and it almost seems like he was the mad professor sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It was like no one really got it, but maybe that was part of the brilliance, you know, or, but you mentioned him being a great bench coach. I'd never heard that before. Can you, like, what would put him to the top of the totem pole there with his bench prowess?
Well, I think that he didn't miss anything to start with. Like he watching, a lot of times he didn't say anything, and sometimes that sort of kept us off balance because we weren't getting much direction. But I think he handled the bench really well. And some nights it was like strange that he'd be really really talkative, and that would kind of keep us off balance because now somebody put a quarter on him, he wouldn't. He was just. But I think I always said we laughed because we had obviously weapons and we had such a team, and I just remember sometimes when the games were on the line, and let's say late in the game it's tied and we get a power play. Well, he's calling a timeout immediately, and I'm sure people in the press on TV are saying, "Oh, I wonder what the great Scotty Bowman's telling them." You know what he's telling them? Nothing, not a thing. He just you know taps Stevie and Shanny and Nick, and they jump over the boards. He wouldn't say anything, but I think the message is the game's going to be won right here. So let's just take a deep breath. Wasn't setting any plays up or anything, but and of course we'd go score, and I'm sure in the TV they're saying that he did it again.
Yeah.
But those things just to make everybody recognize when the game was on the line. That's it. The game's here now. Let's win it here and not go into overtime or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, just those subtle things. But he was in command of the game, and every once in a while he thought he had to go off on the referee, so he would. But it was rare. He wasn't very vocal or talkative behind the bench.
I heard him speak once at a coaches conference. There was like a hot stove with some of the legends, right, of the coaching game, and he was super articulate. And the other thing that kind of, well, I guess I shouldn't say surprised me, but he was like his memory, and I guess I couldn't call him on it because I didn't know what he was talking about. But he like was down to the minute, and like the games, he would tell these stories, and it just seemed like he was super dialed in with that aspect, right, the nuances and the details of the game. And it sounds like
Doesn't
maybe that's
forget
what it was.
anything. Yeah, I mean, doesn't forget anything. I'll tell you one story. The 100th anniversary of the Canadians in 2009. They brought a big contingent of us back, and Scotty, I retired like 6, 7 years before that. He seeked me out right away because I was a Red Wing, and he I think my wife asked him once, how you associate yourself as a Canadian or as a Red Wing? He says as a Red Wing. So we talked a lot that weekend, but everybody was there. From Bellybo was still alive, and the Pocket Rocket and all the great players that were still alive, Gainey and Robinson and Savard. And we were in the alumni room, and Scotty was talking to me, and I think he did feel comfortable with me because I played for him not long ago. And Bob Gainey, who was a good friend, was running the Habs at the time. He was the GM. And he came over and stood beside us as Scotty's talking to me. And Scotty's kind of looking at Bob, but still talking to me. And now I'm getting uncomfortable because I know all Bob wants to do is talk to Scotty about his team. The Habs were struggling at the time. And he knew that if he had 20 minutes with Scotty would dissect his team in 20 minutes. And I'm kind of like trying to back away, like, just get out of here so Bob can talk to Scotty about his team anyway. Finally, there was a break in the action. I kind of slipped away, and Bob said, "Hey, Scotty, can I talk to you about my team for a little while?" And I know Bobby Smith was there at the time. He owns the Moosehead in Halifax, and he said the same thing. I got to go talk to Scotty. He saw one of my games the other day. I want to hear what he has to say about my team. And in November, we were in Detroit for the 25th anniversary of the Cup teams. And Brendan Shanahan said the same thing to me. I got to go talk to Scotty about my team. Yeah, and he's 89 years old and watches hockey all day long, and
Jesus.
Still will tell you what's
So obviously
happening.
super respected.
Yeah, he watches. That's all he does is watch every game, and he can tell you about Austin Matthews or you know, and if you open it up, he'll just start spewing it out. You know, Austin Matthews reminds me of Jean Beliveau. He's got all the comparisons, and yeah, it's interesting talking to him.
That's super cool. All right, just going to take another short break from the conversation with Brent Gilchrist to share another testimonial. I said that should do more of this, and I should, so that's why I'm doing it. Because sharing the success stories is such a positive reinforcement about the change that is able to be made, like the potential of our athletes with the right tools and with the right coaching to really reach up and reach for the stars, right? To be able to chase these goals and dreams and have them step into their own potential. And I just love hearing this. This was a note from a mother of a 13-year-old, just turned 13, who has just graduated the Peak Potential Hockey Project. So you may or may not know the Peak Potential Hockey Project is a 4-week mindset program. I originally designed it for like junior age players, but there is players as young as 12, 13 that have seen great results with it. And so I'm not one to tell anyone what the right age is. I think the right age is whatever age you want it to be. And for this young player, this 13-year-old player, it was the perfect age, according to the mom, because she says, "I am beyond happy with your program. This was information that I've been trying to get my kids to understand to no avail." Like a lot of us out there, I think, right? Parents, it's tough being a parent because no one wants to listen to their parents, but sometimes a similar message from somebody else can stick. So the right message at the right time is can be super valuable. So anyways, back to her testimonial. The way you lay it out for a kid like Austin in hockey sports terms, he is actually understanding and he has been able to put it into practice, ! If I had this type of guidance when I was in a competitive industry, who knows how much further I could have gone. I haven't watched everything myself, and I have let Austin do this on his own accord without any pressure from me, but what I have watched has inspired me as well. Thank you so much. I know Austin is sad it's ending, and so am I, but I know he will continue working at the strategies you have shown him. These are life skills, not just hockey skills, and this will translate into everything he does in the future. Thank you. So what a cool letter to read, and I'm so grateful when parents take the time to write, and sometimes kids take the time to write and share similar feelings, and to me, that is what it's all about. And I think she she hit the nail on the head with the idea that why I'm able to share what I'm doing and why I feel no qualms in doing it is because this helps your hockey player be a better hockey player. But it also helps them be a better human, and it helps them be more productive in other aspects of their life, well beyond the hockey realm. So whenever they decide to take their skates off and hang them up, if they ever do that, then they will still have these skills, and it helps them in school. It helps them with their friendships. It helps them in relationships. It helps them with different levels of adversity and things that will come their way. And isn't that a great gift? Isn't that a great gift to empower our young athletes to feel stronger and more confident in whatever shows up in their life. And yeah, so, for me and for, I know the cost isn't inconsequential to take the program. But when we boil it down to what we do and what we invest in our athletes, whether it be the $300 hockey stick or the $600 skates or, the dryland training or the gym memberships or all this stuff. And rarely do we sink time into investing in their personal growth, right? In their inner growth and in their mental growth. And these are the skills that are going to continue on. Outside of the power skating and outside of the skills sessions. And not only that, but the training also helps them take more advantage of the skills sessions and the training sessions and helps them be more productive on the ice when it comes to performance related things. So thank you so much there for sharing that. I am super grateful for those words, and I am also grateful for anyone who chooses to sign up and to trust the process that this is something that could potentially help their kids. And if you are interested in joining a future guided mission of the Peak Potential Project, that can be found at upmyhockey.com as usual. And now back to the episode with Brent Gilchrist. I wanted to talk. Well, first of all, actually, I wrote down the note because you said your first game up was against Mario, and I don't know how much you're connected into social media or whatever. But Eric Lindros was just on a podcast a little while ago, and he was asked about the greatest players of all time, and he he mentioned two players. One wasn't, and neither one was Gretzky, which was quite shocking. But he said Messier was like his personal favorite, and then he said Lemieux, no one was even close. He said he was just like scary. I'm paraphrasing. What were your thoughts on that? Like on Mario, I guess, or maybe even the contrast between him and Wayne. I'm sure you've been asked that question before, but what did you see with number 66?
Well, I think from a physical standpoint and just trying to defend, because that's kind of all he did with Mario, was just try to defend. He was harder to handle. I think I took a face-off against him at center ice. I know I did. I don't think. And I won the face-off, but he had it behind me. Like he just reached over and grabbed the draw from behind me, pulled it back to him, and you're like, what do I do with this guy? I think my opinion is Wayne was the best player that ever lived because of his accomplishments and what he did. If you were playing against the two of them, there's such a contrast because Wayne it didn't feel like it was hard to play against him. He wasn't overpowering with anything. He just did things and you're like, wow, did he just pass that right through me? I knew it was coming and it went right through my stick and my skates to the backside and somebody scored. His dominance was, controlling the game with his vision and his passing. And Mario was a great passer, don't get me wrong, but he physically, you couldn't handle him when he had the puck. Yeah. Wayne may beat you, but you had a better chance to defend with Wayne when he had the puck, I think. And we often turned away from him because he did that to you. He made you turn away.
Yeah.
He'd delay and change the pace. But Mario, like, what do you do with him? How do you check him? Like, you go to hit him and he puts it through your legs and just kind of goes over top of you, or if he wants to lean back into you with a reverse shoulder, he's stronger than you are. So yes, in those instances, they're hard to compare.
Right.
For me, I just compare the accomplishment and the way Wayne changed record books, and that's what I would say. But from trying to compare him playing against him, it's the contrast is massive. It's just there's no rhyme or reason.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, like what he was able to accomplish over the length of his career, and obviously Mario did so much of the stuff he did with with the back that he had and through the cancer and had a shorter career, and like kind of like a Bobby Orr scenario. Like how good have Bobby Orr been, right? Like, so from a physical individual specimen, I think that there's probably an interesting conversation there, but
well, and I would not like this is not taking anything away from Mario. Like he was, I mean, from a physical and talent standpoint, I don't know if you can compare anybody to him. So there's nothing to take away from it. It's just when you look at the record books, it's hard not to say that Wayne, his accomplishments are just unachievable for anybody.
It's not even close.
Yeah,
it's not even close. But that's an interesting discussion too. So I mean, you're a goal a game guy in the WHL. When you by the time you left, almost in your second year too. A high goal scorer. You were a point a game guy in the AHL, and then in your long 700-800 games almost in the NHL, you reached the 20 goal plateau twice. Obviously, nothing. Not degrading that by any stretch of the imagination, but that funnel gets so tight. Or can you talk about like what the difference is between being a good junior and being a prolific NHLer?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I came up, and I think I didn't really have an offensive output season until my fourth year, and then I never attained those fourth year numbers again. And I look at it, and I feel like I left some on the table. That I felt like I should have scored 20 goals more, and I would even say, Jay, that I was put in a position to do it quite a few times because it's not like I didn't play on the power play. Like I did, I got power play time. Right. I wasn't a first or automatic second line power play guy, but I got lots of time on the power play, particularly in the seasons when I was, having more offensive output. I think when I played, I was obviously doing a lot of playing against some top players in more defensive role in a lot of ways, but man, I had opportunity to be on the offensive side too, and a lot of times I felt like the coaches and the team were looking like you're part of the offensive part of the offense of the team too. They weren't certainly discounted, but there's two things. My first 10 years is one career, and my last 5 is a different career. And my numbers my first 10 years were not bad. If you just look at those and say, oh, that's not bad. My numbers my last 5 years were anemic because I wasn't the same player after we won the Cup in '98. I went through three surgeries, abdominal surgeries, and so there's no excuse here. I just wasn't the same player at my size. Losing a step through that process was not very productive, and at times I was I was hanging on, and I was had enough experience and some would say enough hockey intelligence to navigate my way through, but I was not productive my last 5 years. Didn't play a lot, missed a lot of games, and was obviously a player that they still saw some value in, could help in situations, and but that's I think the biggest thing. I think I feel like there's a lot left out there, and it's not a regret or anything, but I just felt like I could have contributed more a lot of times offensively, and it is what it is.
Yeah. Anything that you would pinpoint to? I mean, I like the fact that you brought that up because sometimes when you're coming up, right, to jump into a top 6 role or whatever is hard to do. So you have to earn your way doing another thing, and then sometimes you become really good at that, and then maybe you don't get that opportunity, right? You don't get seen as an offensive guy. But you said you were seen at different points or given the opportunity. Did it just not click, or what do you remember about those times when you were given those chances?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is when we came to Montreal, we were a very defensive team. We had lots of offensive players, but we were a defensive team. We always won the Jennings Trophy as the lowest goals against, and so you did learn that game, and it did. There certainly wasn't a lot of I don't want to say offensive gammon, but you were really responsible with the puck. So that sort of changed my game from a junior and an American League player, where you're expected to score and you take some chances to score. So that's one. Um, but I think that for whatever reason, I just don't feel like I was consistent enough offensively, and it's just it's sometimes it's confidence, sometimes it's the role you're playing, sometimes it's the game was tough in the '90s, as you know, because you came up. I'm just trying to remember when you came up, but like the late '90s to the 2000s, my arms had welts on them. And being an undersized player in that game where you could hook and hold and slash, there was nowhere to move. There was games where it's just like, so if I did have some advantage that I was quick and I was fast, a lot of that was nullified. So that was a tough period of time.
Right.
And these are not excuses, but I feel like there was times when I could have performed better offensively, and sometimes I was given the chance to, and I didn't. And it's a mystery. And then again, the last 4 or 5 years of my career was I was a different player, and I was trying to enjoy being in the National Hockey League and trying to contribute to the team, but wasn't certainly as healthy. I was older and unhealthy, and those weren't not great combinations.
Yeah, well, I was going to actually talk to you about that because when you came up, like you said, like this 5'10", 180 was fairly common, and then late '90s, 2000s. I mean, the league got really big too, right?
It did. I mean, even bigger than now. I think I'm not positive, but I remember I was at a players meeting, an NHL players meeting in Whistler. Can't remember what year it was, 2000 or something like that. And I was standing in the lobby talking to Eric Lindros, and can't remember who the other guys were. Ciccone. There was 3 of them, I think. And I walked away, and my wife was there, and she goes, "Oh my God. Like, I feel so terrible for you." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You actually play against those guys?" And they were 3 of them. It probably looked pretty bad to her, right? Like standing next to Eric.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I feel terrible for you." I'm like, and as you know, as a player, you never really thought about that, right? But then I look back and I'm like, yeah, these guys are getting big. And the other problem with these guys that were getting big is they were fast.
Yeah.
Right. And when I came in the league in the 80s, there was some big guys, but I always felt like, I could navigate that with speed. Well, you're not really faster than these guys anymore. Like they're big and fast. And the game changed a lot, and the physicality was there, and obviously there was a lot more clutching and grabbing, hooking and holding was just part of it.
Yeah. You talked about kind of the two different careers and or the two different players, and you didn't have many games there the last 5 years and didn't have much production. But you said like there's a reason that they kept you around, and maybe you didn't really completely recognize it at the time, but once you retire and all the things that are said about you and what a character guy you were and what a great teammate you were, like it's one thing that I try and preach, at least, to these younger guys, is like the value of that, and how it gives you opportunities. It extends careers. It just, there's just so many things it does to you to be a good human. Do you think that was part of like the recipe for you of why those last 5 years happened?
I think there's two things. So one thing in Montreal that I will say that, the way we were commanded to play on both sides of the puck, and even sometimes more so on the defensive side of the puck. What I found in Montreal is I started to turn into a little bit of a utility player, and that carried on with me. So I think that most coaches I played for believed I could play on a first line in situations where they needed it. Not saying that I'd go on the first line and stay there, but I played on the first line with Modano sometimes in Dallas, and then I did play quite a bit on Stevie's line. My first year in Detroit. Well, we were a line, even though there was no first line in Detroit. We had three of them, right? So the utility thing was very helpful to extend my career. I could penalty kill. I could play on a fourth line and be productive. And when they needed a left winger up on the first line, I could fill in there. And so any of the lines I could probably be productive for a period of time. That's one. And then I think that my time in Montreal taught me that the team is the only thing that really matters. And yes, your career matters and you matter, but when the team's successful, it's so much easier for you. When the team's winning, they're not really looking around to make a bunch of changes, right? So you become a good teammate because it's part of your survival. When we win, your job is probably a lot less at risk. And, you think about that as a player. And so, coming out of Detroit, I had a great experience in Detroit. In the last 2 years, I was hurt quite a bit, but great experience, and I think I was really respected by the team, and probably stayed in Detroit longer than I should have, considering how good the team was and where I was in my career. But I think they thought, hey, low maintenance, does everything we ask him, good in the room, hard worker. And so that's probably got me sort of my last 2 years in the league. I played a bit in Dallas and then went to Nashville. And Nashville was clearly not a good season, but I think that they recognized that they needed an older player, a couple older players, and somebody who had won and somebody who played on real good teams. And so, I wouldn't say the Nashville experience was much of a success from my standpoint as a player, but it got me paid for another year, and it was a good experience to live in Nashville. My family liked it, and I really liked the guys on the team. So, but I knew I was done, and I just walked away quietly because I was like, I'm not productive, and I didn't try to get another contract. And I'm not saying I could have even got another contract.
Yeah,
likely not. But it was like I left everything here. I'm good.
Right. Fair enough. I really think it's interesting what you said there, and it. I mean, I don't know what it is, whether it's a philosophy or not, but like that idea. Just that underarching idea that the team, like if I can take care of the team, then I get taken care of, right? Instead of I need to take care of myself when the team's not going well or whatever, right? And you can see that. I mean, you can see that high level business in different companies, like how that transpires. You can see that in the NHL in different cultures, right? Like how that transpires. And like if you were to run a team or if you were to be a coach, like how do you try to instill that? Because there has to be truth to it, right? You have to be able to actually take care of your players. And I think, I'll just say I saw that in Detroit. Like it seemed like guys were taken care of in Detroit. Like you were a team guy, then they would take care of you. And that allowed like a third line right winger
to take care of the fourth line right winger rookie that was coming in, because they wanted him to be great instead of like pushing his head down and, you know, trying to get him out of there. You know, at least that was the vibe that I felt. Like, can
It's
you speak to that a
100%
little
the
bit?
vibe. Yeah, and I think you're in that is 100% of the vibe in Detroit. It was 100% the vibe in Montreal, and I'm not saying on our teams it wasn't either, but it was very, very prevalent in Montreal that everybody was pulling for you. You were part of the team. But you know, I just had a thought that you said, you know, when you're a coach or a GM, how do you do this? Well, it's one decision, it's one action at a time, and you know, I think about the culture we had in Montreal. It's 100-year culture. It's a 25 Stanley Cup culture. Like you already have it. All you have to do there is not mess it up. You got to keep it. You got to keep your old players around. You got to keep your alumni around. You got to remind people, look at the rafters, right? And you got to treat them like that. And in Detroit, it was similar. I mean, we obviously they went through a tough spell after you know a lot of cups in the 50s, and they were a weak team in the 70s and in the 80s, and then they built this and they got the culture back. And how do you hang on to it? And it's not easy. Like we all say, well, you got to have good culture. Well, culture, you just don't wake up one day and say, hey, we got a good culture now. It's years of development, whether it's a business or a hockey team. It's one decision, it's one action at a time. And for these new teams, you know, or these teams that haven't been good, they have to continue to build on that. And that's why I said earlier, ownership's important because that's where it starts. And then the president and the manager and the coaching staff and the training staff and you build it from inside, and you can't do it part way. It's got to be every single decision. You can't take care of players that aren't good enough anymore, right? Like they've got to go, and I think the players totally understand that. But when you're a player that's helping, when you're a player that's doing all the right things, you get some more leeway to stay there. Because do you change a fourth line player out to somebody that's maybe he's going to be a little bit better, but we don't know his character. We don't know what he's going to bring. So certainly you can extend your career, or you can, you know, for young players who are just trying to come up, or maybe they're never going to be NHL players, but they may make teams because of what they're bringing from a you know a character standpoint, from a discipline standpoint, from a you know being a great teammate and a great you know great role model.
I'm going to take one last break here from the podcast to announce that I am hiring. I will be hiring hopefully in the next month, maybe two, but I need help. I need help in the admin department. I need help with onboarding clients. I need help with the creation of new courses. I need help with some simple accounting. As of right now, Up My Hockey has been all Jason Podolin, and for me to supply the best service and to serve my clients the best and to generate new products and new programs and new ways to serve, I need to get out of my own way. And that means bringing somebody on board. So kind of an inaugural event and really a cool event. But to be able to say that I am in a position to bring someone in is exciting. It's also a bit scary, but this will be the first official member of the Up My Hockey team. And so it's not going to be a position that I'm going to take lightly. It might be a part-time position, potentially full-time. I'm trying to figure that out right now. But I think for sure it'll be like a 4-hour-a-day type thing. So if there's anyone out there listening that, you know, would like to be a part of what Up My Hockey is, first and foremost, if you are somebody that's passionate about helping other players, other people, if you are passionate about what mindset can do and what personal development can do, and if you're gung-ho on hockey, you love hockey, you've been a part of it in some way, shape, or form, these are all bonus points. I'm all about people. I'm all about putting good people in right positions. And you definitely need to be drinking the Kool-Aid of what the Up My Hockey philosophy is for me to want to work with you and for you to want to work with me, because I think we can accomplish great things with the right person there, and really being a people-first, people-centric person. There might be some opportunities to do some chatting with inside the Facebook group as well. There could be a need for you to be a little bit social media savvy, at least with regards to being able to make posts. And yeah, so I'm excited. So if you are out there, if you're listening, if you are looking for some extra income, if you want to be a part of a growing a growing business that is helping players become better and growing as people and growing as players and helping organizations and teams to take a step forward, then this could be the perfect spot for you. I would love to meet you. I would love to chat about what it is you can provide and what it is I'm looking for. So there's my first official shout out. If you are there and if you hear me and if the rings true and if you are interested, by all means, send me a contact email. jason@upmyhockey.com is how you can reach me. There's also a contact form on the website at www.upmyhockey.com where you can get in touch and let me know that this might be something you're interested in. And we'll take it from there. So thank you very much for listening. And now we'll get back to the conversation with Brent Gilchrist. What your very first year, we talked a little bit before the podcast even started, like that was, you're in the NHL, you're playing for the Canadians. They're a few years removed from a cup at that point, but then you get to the finals again. Like what? And it looks like you played 9 games that playoff season. Like that must have been an absolute whirlwind for you. What was that like?
Yeah, it was fantastic. So I came up with 11 or 12 games into the season, and I had a good year. Like I think I played 48 or 49 games, and I had 24 points. So I had a pretty good offensive year, really, for a rookie who was in and out of the lineup. Had a really good first round against Hartford because Bob Gainey was hurt. And then halfway through the Boston series, Bob came back. I was playing really well, actually. I was really happy with what I was playing. I think they were too. I certainly wasn't going to take Bob Gainey's spot, our captain. So he came back in the lineup, and I played sparingly after that and got into actually 2 games in the finals. I'll just add that the only 2 games in the finals we won, I was playing. So anyway, we lost in 4, but I played game 2 and 3, and we won. So it was an incredible experience. So that was one of those, situations where it was so disappointing to lose the cup, but yet you're kind of pinching yourself where you are. My first year in the league, we go to the finals. I hear people say, man, I'd hate to go to the finals and lose. I said, well, I hate not going to the finals. I choose all day going to the finals and not get knocked out in the first round. But yeah, it was an incredible season, and to lose was super, super disappointing. I got to tell you, at the same time, wow, here I am, and we'll be in. My thought process: we were a great team. We'll win it next year. We'll be in the finals next year. Well, it took me 10 years to get back there. It's interesting. In Philadelphia, we beat the Flyers in the Spectrum in Game 6, and on the bus out of Philly, Bob Gainey sat down with me. We cracked a beer, and he said, we got a real kick at the can now. And he says, just remember, when you're here, you got to win it, because you never know when you're going to be back. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, Bob, like, you're 36 or 37. I get that for you, but I'm going to be here. I'm thinking to myself, I'm on the Montreal Canadiens. I'm going to be here lots. Yeah, no, didn't get back for 10 years.
That is, I was going to say, that's, some guys never get there, right? It's a hard thing to do. One, right? Of course. And then you can totally take it for granted. What was there any, that was probably an amazing perspective. to be 30, I guess, ish, right? When you went with Detroit, and now you're back there with this great team, back to the final, like that must have been an entirely new perspective, an entirely new appreciation for what was going on.
I felt like I was on a bit of a mission. I know the team was. The only real change they made after winning in '97 was I came in and Thomas Sandstrom had left. And I was out with my roommate, actually, my ex-roommate, Bobby Rouse, who lives in Langley. We went to the Detroit game on Monday night together. And I said, do you remember what, he was my roommate that first year in Detroit.
Yeah.
And I said, you remember what you said to me? He goes, what did I say? He goes, I said in about mid-October, you said to me one night, you said, we really only made one change from last year. So if we don't win the cup, man, it's your fault. It's just great, right? But I felt like I was on a total mission that year. The team was, obviously, with the accent with Vladimir Konstantinov. And it was a team that was focused. We had a decent regular season. We did what we had to do. Sergey had sat out till February. They signed him from an offer sheet from Carolina, and we were just tough to beat. I mean, we were tough to beat, but we had our hands full with Dallas, which was another wrinkle for me. I leave the Stars to sign with the Red Wings as a free agent. Who do we meet in the conference finals? And really, who are the best teams in the league? Those two. So that would have been a terrible pill to swallow. Great series, and we ended up beating them. They won the next year. So flip a coin who was going to win that series. So I really felt like I was on a mission to get there. Incredible feeling.
Yeah. Who'd you have in the final series? Was it Pittsburgh?
It was Washington. But that's where I changed my career because I was playing hurt, and by the game 6, we beat Dallas in game 6. I was done. I couldn't step on the ice the last 10 minutes, so I was finished for the playoffs. So that was disappointing, but it is what it is. You do what you have to do, and it certainly changed my career, but I've never once regretted it.
Well, yeah, and I saw, maybe you can speak a little bit more on that, because I saw a clip, and I'm not sure if they played it where they played it, it was at the Vernon Carnival tournament, they put it together or not, but I think it was Brendan Shanahan talking about you that series, that run, and then saying, like the pain that you were going through, that they could actually hear you, screaming in another room, trying to be able to play. Like what was the pain, and what were you going through, and what were you doing to get on the ice?
Well, 20 games ago in the season, I was having a good year, and but I really had a bad groin, and I went in to tell Scotty that I think I need a week or two off, and he says, I agree. Playoffs are 18, 20 games away, so just never got better, got worse as I sat out, and it was a torn rectus abdominis. It was an athletic hernia, athletic sports hernia, or athletic pubalgia, whatever they call it now. And it wasn't going to go away. So I ended up starting cortisone shots right before the playoffs started. And it allowed me to get back in. I missed the first 2 games against Phoenix and at home, and we were in Phoenix. And I hadn't skated for probably 6 weeks. And I had 2 more shots, and I felt good. So Scotty said, go out for warm-up. So I went out for warm-up in Phoenix, and he was standing at the door when I came in. And he said, how did it feel? I said, it felt great, Scotty. It felt awesome. I had no idea he was setting me up. I had no idea. I said, I can't believe that the pain's gone. He goes, I want you to play. And I'm like, I haven't skated in 6 weeks, game 3 of the first round. And he goes, you won't play much, don't worry. He said, and the spots you're taking, he told me the players, they're not going to play. So I'm like, fuck. So here I am, sharpen my skates. Let's get some sticks ready. And I played 12 and a half minutes.
Wow.
And we won. And I actually had some good chances to score. It was just like one of those things. So I finished that series. I scored a big goal in game 6. We were down 2 games to 1. No, we lost that game. That's right. We lost the first game I played. We're down 2 games to 1. There was a lot of pressure on us, right? Defending Stanley Cup champions. Phoenix had a real good team. They had a really good team. And the building in the America West building was crazy. So we ended up gathering ourselves and winning the next 4, or winning the next 3, and eliminating them. And then we played St. Louis, and I played the St. Louis series, and I tweaked it again in like game 5, and decided not to play game 6 in case there was a game 7. I played game 7 and didn't play game 6. We won, and then I played the whole Dallas series with injections every period.
Every period.
Yeah.
And where were those injections going? Like directly into the groin?
Groin and lower abdominals, and they pinpoint them. And anyway, it was well documented at the time. Stevie actually talked about it at our pep rally when we won the cup. But I don't know, like the mentality you're at the time, you don't really think about it that much. And by game six against Dallas, I had taken a stride, and I didn't feel anything anymore. It was gone. So when they did the ultrasound after the game, they said no, not a chance.
Like it was
So
like you tore it right off or
yeah,
whatever happened. Yeah,
yeah. So
that's crazy. What was there any pressure from the wife, or is that did it matter if there was any? Like how was that as far as like the choice, the decision?
I don't know. Like we weren't making decisions. Like we were
Right.
just doing, and she knew I was in a lot of pain, and but I don't. We weren't rationalizing anything. And I would say this to you that the Red Wings treated me so well, and I don't think they ever forgot. So even when my last year or so in Detroit, they were behind me, and I know where it came from. Really,
Yeah, that's pretty special. I mean, that's crazy. Um, yeah, hard to do. Good on you. I mean, and it is something that's kind of a part of your legacy now, I guess. With them and what you're willing to do to win. I mean, that's one of those things that people always talk about, right? Like, how committed are you to the end result? And sometimes it takes somebody like a Brent Gilchrist to do that. And obviously, I'm sure it made everyone else stand a little harder and forget about their aches and pains a little bit too along the way.
I think so. And for me, I don't think I make as big a deal about it. I don't talk about it a lot. I think my teammates made a much bigger deal about
Right. Yeah, and probably point taken, right? Because yeah, you're the one in it, right? And it,
it.
you
Yeah,
knew
like
what
I
you were
said,
doing.
we weren't making any decisions. I wasn't
Right.
thinking about, well, maybe we should do. We were just doing.
Yeah.
And but yeah, my teammates, they still talk, in November when we got together, they talked about it. And
Yeah.
it's special for me, but I think it was less. I mean, I think it helped them. I agree. But I don't even think about it that much anymore.
Right. We're wrapping up. We're over an hour. You've mentioned already sitting there and talking with the U13 players at the Vernon Carnival tournament, 50-year anniversary of it, and to have you come back and speak. First of all, I mean, thank you for doing that. I know it's something you didn't have to do. But if there's a message, I mean, I heard a lot of great things about your talk. But on my platform here, it is, it's hockey families and it's young junior age players who want to get somewhere or want to be, the NHLer and lift the cup over their head. Any advice for them in the last little few minutes here at the podcast?
Well, I think the biggest thing is advice for the kids is if you've got a dream, that's it. You've got to pursue it. You've got to do everything you can to achieve that dream, and don't let anybody tell you. Don't let anybody tell you you're too small or too slow or not good enough or you're a girl and not a boy or whatever it is. I think that's key. There's no secret, as you know, Jason. You went through it. There's no secret how we got there. And to the parents, you're not going to make your son or daughter a professional hockey player. You can love them, you can support them, and they'll need that. But their path is going to be their own. It'll be blazed by themselves. And lots of people are there to help them, and parents are there to help them. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the player that does it. And for the players, um, that I think that's it. You've got a dream. That's the best thing in the world. There's nothing better than the dream. Achieving it's pretty fantastic, but I think the dream is just as important as the achievement. Yeah, just don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Period.
I love it. Yeah, no, that's great. Great way to end. I really appreciate your time and sharing your story with us. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad we finally able to
Good.
do it. And yeah, I appreciate
Enjoyed
your
it.
time, Gil.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I enjoyed it.
All right, fantastic stuff there from Brent. So thankful that he was able to come on, and the fact if you stuck around to the end, I hope you did, and you heard those stories about him and his groin and the hernia, and actually playing to a point that his groin detached from his body, getting cortisone shots in between periods, 2 of them every period to be able to play, to a point where his teammates would hear him screaming, taking the needles. Just for a band of brothers to win a championship, like it's amazing. It's amazing what the power of that can do, where it becomes bigger than you. You mean, there's no way Brent does that if it's an individual type sport thing. I know there isn't. It just wouldn't happen. But when you have 20 other guys in that locker room that need you, and that you want to be there for, that you want to be able to help them, like, you end up doing these super crazy, superhuman almost like things. And to Brent's point, every time he gets together with his teammates, it's not something that he really wants to talk about, but they do. Like, the impression that left on them is something that they talk about now, 20 years later. And what an impact that must have had in the moment, for those guys, for the Brendan Shanahans and the Steve Yzermans and the Lidstroms and all the Drapers and everyone else that was on that team, that everyone in a hockey playoff series has aches and pains, and they have bumps and bruises, and they have stuff that they're going through and they're trying to fight through. And when you see a guy that's going to that extent to put his jersey on, it makes you stand a little taller, and it makes your own issue feel a little less relevant. And I'm sure he was a major, major component in why that team was successful on that run that year. And really fantastic stuff. And I think that, it stems from him talking about his upbringing with the Canadians. And if you heard him say again and again and again, what that organization meant to him and what it taught him. And those lessons that it taught him allowed him to be a better human and a better player and a better teammate for the rest of his career. And it's even translated into his business life. Like, those lessons matter. And so for you, anyone out there playing hockey right now, or any team sport for that matter, do not forget that it is a team sport. Like, there is so many lessons to be learned just by being on a team, and how you choose to show up in that environment. Right? Like, how do you show up? Is it about you? Is it about you? And be honest with that. Is it about what you do in that game, about the goals and assists that you get, or the ice time that you get, or how you get to do what you want to do? Or is it about the collective? Are you able to shift maybe your focus a little bit away from yourself and try and think about the value you can add to others around you? And also, what can the group provide you if you give something to the group? We need to look outside ourselves, and hockey has a way of being able to do that, but we also have to be a willing participant as a player. So any of you individuals out there who are playing, who kind of have a me first mentality, this conversation is so beneficial to hear the value of team, and hear the value of putting your teammates first, or the winning, like the idea of winning first, and to be a utilitarian player, as Gilly said it, like that he was able to be fit into different scenarios. It made him valuable. It made him have a longer tenure. And if you're a player that's really stuck in their ways about who you're supposed to be and what you are, and you only have fun playing the game a certain way, that limits you, right? And that makes you potentially not much of a team guy. So being the utility player that Gilly said, and also being a guy that wants to be there for his teammates, and that's going to build trust with his teammates and with the coaching staff. This is all great stuff, and I think that's one of the values of the Up My Hockey podcast, is that we get to highlight some of these things and talk about them and show the value there, because sometimes it's not the things that get recognized on the TSN highlight reels and the plays of the week, and it's not the stat line sometimes at the end of the day, but it's the players like Brent Gilchrist that help everyone be better and help teams be successful, whether that be in business or on the ice or in whatever arena that you are playing in. So I think that's a great way to end this one. Team first, be a team player, be a good human, and you will get taken care of. You just got to find your people. So till next time, play hard and keep your head up.